let's understand the talent. So understanding the talent is, I think one way of it is putting yourself in the talent shoes. For many of us who have worked 10, 15, 20 years, we have a perspective and expectation of what the workplace is. Now, but that is not the perspective of the talent. So let me share with you an example and how you can relate. Lee Kuan Yew was frustrated because he was saying the younger generation don't appreciate what the older generation did. And somebody actually mentioned, how can the younger generation appreciate what happened with the older generation when they were never there? And he actually brought up a very important point. How do we expect the newer generation to understand us when they were never in our shoes, they never experienced what we have? All they know is they can read about it. So we want to say, okay, let's put our side and go to the younger generation. So there are 4 areas that shapes our talent today. Firstly, it's personal aspiration. People today do not work just to make a living. People today sees work as contributing to their life. So they have dreams, they have desires. You ask a lot of them, they were talking about, I want to open business, I want to be traveling, I want to be rich, right? In fact, somebody said, if teach your children to say, I want to be a millionaire. Because, in school, they say, bila besar nak jadi apa? Teach them to say, saya nak jadi jutawan, right? So that was about dreams and desires. So we do need to understand their dream and desires. Now, work and life today is a lot more work-life integration. I learned this term when I was in Singapore. It's not more work-life balance, it's work-life integration. That means you do work in your personal life and you do life in your work. Now, is that healthy? Not really, but it requires the ability to manage and prioritize even more, because now you are not defined by time boundary. So that's important. Now, they don't really see the career ladder as the ultimate focus of work. I have seen a lot. In fact, I was also one of those who moved laterally rather than vertically, because I wanted to pick up the different skill sets, right? A client of mine, and I remember this one manager, he's now a manager. Within a span of 7 years, he moved across 4 departments. And it's not because he wasn't producing. It's just that he moved across. So we need to recognize the employees today may not really want the whole career ladder thing. I want to be a GM. They may not really want that. So we need to understand what they want. For them, work is only a small part. They have no problem leaving the job because it doesn't fit into what they want. And they have dreams and desires. And our role is to be able to see how can we work with that, right? So that's a personal aspiration. The second one, cultural influence. And now, a lot of things, the 4 points I'm going to share sounds sensitive, sounds critical, but I use Hofstede's cultural dimension. You will see Malaysia has the highest power distance. Now, what does that tell us? A talent will not voice out even if they disagree, right? Even if we say something that's not right, they will just, yes, here one. Because that is how our culture has brought us up. So think about it, when you were young and you were listening your parents talking to their bosses, and you as a child think what the boss says doesn't make sense. And then later on, but your parents say yes, yes, yes. Then later when you go away, you ask your parents, hey, actually, why you say yes? And then your parents say, I also don't know, quite nonsensical. Then you say, but just now you say okay. So what happened is, over time, we have been conditioned to not question authority, to not question seniority. And we're talking in general culture, right? That's one. Secondly, perceive feedback as an embarrassment. And this was quite shocking as well as interesting. When I moved back to Malaysia and started doing more work here, I realized people will give very general feedback. That's one. Secondly, the feedback is always nice sounding. And therefore, the feedbacks are usually not actionable. That's one. Now, the reason people, while we were taught and we were trained that feedback is for improvement, in the Malaysian context, a lot of the time when you give feedback, it's perceived as embarrassing. So I had an experience where somebody perceived me as a subject matter expert. And then this person started asking me question or disagree with me. The friend kind of got shocked, and later on, this person told me that the friend told her that she was being rude to me because she questioned the subject matter expert. My point is, this is the culture our talent is in. Now, I would perhaps even stretch it a bit. If you notice, if you have talent who are overseas graduate, and I'm not talking those who get overseas degree, I'm talking about those who have gone overseas for 2 to 3 to 4 years, compared to those who graduate here, you realize there's a difference in the way they talk and voice out their points. Now, tend to make assumptions instead of asking for clarification. Once again, go and Google for this thing called high versus low context culture, and you will see in the Malaysian culture, we make a lot of assumption. The reason why we base a lot on assumption because there is an expectation that relationship needs to be built first before anything gets done, and that's very much our culture. And the third and the fourth one, in our culture, we do not like to stand out. So you will have talents who are talents, but they do not want to stand out because they don't want others to look at them and say, oh, budak ni tunjuk pandai. So once again, I think most of you can relate. During school days, right, if you have a Malay chap trying to speak English, the rest will eject him and say, oh, nak tunjuk pandai lah, Mak Saleh. And that happened. I was, sorry? Yeah. So I grew up at Sekolah Kebangsaan, and I saw that happening with my Malay friends itself, right? And this is something that happens. People don't like to stand up. And therefore, you will have, so as a leader, and this is where I specialize, the way we practice leadership in the West and the way we practice leadership in Asia is very different. A leader has to go down a lot more in the Asian context compared to the Western context where the talent can actually ask questions. Psychological contract. And this is I think it was in the 70s. It was coined by a psychologist that says employees today has a psychological contract. An employment contract is a physical contract. A psychological contract is more what they expect but have not mentioned. Two key points here. Firstly, a workplace that makes them feel accepted. For those of us who work long enough, you realize when we first joined the workforce, it became our job to fit into the organization. In today's culture, it's different. When a new joiner joins, he expects that the organization welcomes them. So you look at a lot of the posting on LinkedIn where when a person joins a company, they get a tag, they get a welcome note, they get a special bag, they get everything to make their what we call an employee's experience. So employee expect to the workplace accept them. That's one. Secondly, employees expect that the bosses care for them. Now, by caring, it's not just about pay, right? Pay is a hygiene factor. Caring means the bosses needs to be able to show about how are you feeling? Are you doing okay? What else can I support you? Or saying that, I notice you made a mistake. What can we do to help you overcome that? So they actually want this type of conversations. And therefore, while we label them as being soft, actually what they are looking for is care. So that's a psychological contract. Go and Google this term. You'll be surprised. And you will start to realize a lot of managers are not doing this. A lot of us assume that our employees should know that we care for them, but we do not demonstrate that in our action. Finally, this generation is knowledge rich, experience poor, because they read a lot, knowledge is accessible all over, and therefore there's a tendency to believe if I know something because I read or I watch YouTube, I can do it. So this becomes one of the biggest challenge when organization and leaders think that developing talent means sending them for workshop. That is perhaps very dangerous because when you send them for workshop, they learn something, but question, did they practice it? And as long as they don't practice it, they do not have the experience. So a lot of the younger generation talk about, it's quite easy, not difficult, or you notice there's tendency for the younger generation to complain about organization because they do not know how organization works. All they know is in the school, in the university textbook, it says, okay, this is how the Berg-Leadwin model looks like, this is what they need to do. So that's what's happening, right? And this leads to point two, there is an emotional disconnect from a new task. So for example, talking about managing a difficult employee, it's easy to say step one, step two, step three, something like what I'll be doing today. But because they have not had the experience, the emotional turmoil, the sweaty palm, because I'm going to talk to this person, but the fellow is going to shout at me, or the fellow is going to scold me. They never had that experience, so they are not. So there's a disconnect. So they see things as easy. They make comments, right? And this is where, so this is something to highlight. These are 4 areas that actually shapes your employee. And therefore, the question is, Isaac, wow, there's so many things. How do I address all this? Now, one of the things that we work with leaders a lot is to have this thing called a career conversation. So a career conversation is a one-to-one conversation that you have with a talent, right? So you look at it, it is an informal conversation to understand your talents, aspiration, and goal in life, not just at work. So it's really about you being professional and understanding what is it they want in life, right? So let me give you an example. I was working with a client, and the manager was telling me that, so after we talked about career conversation, I actually get them to go back and practice. What happened was this manager actually sat with the technician or supervisor, and asked the supervisor, what are your dreams and goals? And he actually said, I'm planning to open a restaurant, or cafe or restaurant. And based on what I've taught them, they actually started finding out more exactly what kind of cafe, what kind of restaurant, what kind of skills do you need in order to operate a restaurant. So he started telling this manager, and you know what? One thing hit the manager was the staff actually said, one of the skills I think I need to learn is how do I use Excel to manage my finance. And light bulb goes on. Because why? The manager has been trying to get this staff to learn Excel for the longest time because he needed this guy to start keying in data and churning out some reports. But all this while, the staff will always say he's busy. Now, after this conversation, right, the staff actually sign up for the workshop. Why? Because there is an alignment of goal, and the goal is not limited just to work. The old way of career conversation is where do you see yourself 3 years from now in an organization? Hey, not everybody wants to be in your organization for more than 3 years. All right, so that's the reality. So informal conversation. Second, distill their wants and goals into skills, knowledge, and exposure. So this is where it's important. So let's say if a person wants to open a business, you notice there are business skills that he needs to learn. Things like strategy, things like finance, things like how do you calculate your pricing, things like marketing, things. So a lot of these skills that the person needs in order to open a restaurant. And you want to break this down, and therefore once you take this, you actually look in your own work what you need him to do, and you do a matching. So that's that one. And then developing them in the areas that achieves the skill and desire they want. So based on the story I shared, the manager wants to develop Fleur to do Excel so he can do some production data collection. And this Fleur realized that he needs to pick up Excel, and therefore, bam, the employee actually became self-motivated to learn Excel. Now, it is not a one-off conversation. It should be ongoing. So usually we recommend have a career conversation when the staff first join, get to know their dream and desire, but then from time to time, just check in with them, say, how's everything? Hey, and then make it informal. Make it over coffee. How's everything going, right? Remember last time you shared me about this, are you still on that journey? So you want to talk about that. And finally, do this separately from performance appraisal. Never have a career conversation during performance appraisal, because if it's a bad performance appraisal, they're not going to share with you their goals and dreams. So this is a skill that you can use to understand your talent.